Hello everybody. In this video, we're going to continue working with APIs. And one of the things that I would like to do now is to start building our backend server so we can actually construct the API. So we learned a little bit with the previous week with the enemy roulette. I know it was a longer video series, but we learned how to consume a specific API. But the major part that I want to focus in that is that we learned how to guide the UI for whatever the API respond to us. That's the biggest part here. We needed to understand how when a good API provides the data and the responses the way that it's supposed to be, you can guide the UI and react to that. So we were able to make the adjustment for the rate limiting. We were able to make the adjustment for the loading state. We were able to make different adjustments that we needed to do in order to provide a better user experience whenever we consume a specific API. Now, I didn't choose the most complicated one, but just enough that I think I was able to share that knowledge with you, with everybody. Now will be the other way around, that we are going to be building our own API and we will follow some best practices. So at the beginning will be something really, really simple, and then we will scale it up and have the best practices about how that API need to be working and how that one need to be provided for our users able to consume the way they're supposed to be. So that will be the focus today. And for that, I will use a specific framework called Hono. Hono is a framework that has been taking a lot of track lately because this runs in every JavaScript runtime out there, and it has a well, I know this now sounds like a sales pitch, right? But yeah, in reality, this is fast. It's really lightweight. It works in Cloudflare directly and another JavaScript runtimes out there. But it includes have built-in middleware. We can create our custom ones, and it have a really good developer experience for the clean APIs and TypeScript support. Of course, we are not going to be using TypeScript, but we can benefit a little bit for the types that Home application has. So going a little bit in history, man, I will not go that deeply here. When we needed to, JavaScript was created for the browser originally, and I was created for the browser to execute that code and do something specifically to alter or to interact with the document itself or the web page itself. And it's been growing in a way that some years ago, I don't have the years on top of my mind. Somebody asked me, well, what about if I can run JavaScript in my server side? Previously, server code will be something like on .NET with C Sharp, using the .NET from Windows mostly. And now is open source and I think it's open for Linux and Mac computers too. Or you need to run it in Ruby on Rails, or you need to run it in PHP, that kind of language, Java, including full Java itself, and like more robust languages that were able to run on the server by Netre. So when the creator of Node.js came up, it's just the way how to run Node.js in the backend and how to use JavaScript as a language across the board. So that was the main theory how to execute that. So far, we'll be deploying the static pages, but now we can deploy also the dynamic applications using our backend in JavaScript. And Node.js will be in the runtime by default regarding that. There's a lot of other runtimes right now, like we have Dino, we have Bun that we can install. And probably you'll be hearing those if you're keeping up with the news in the JavaScript or in the development world. But we'll use our Node.js environment that we have set it up to be able to proceed and do that. And a framework like Hono, it makes that really, really simple. So the way that you can see right now on the screen, you can see with 4 lines, we have an API that sends a text called hello Hono. It's simple, just importing the Hono library, initialize it with a new Hono function. Then we define the verb. So whenever we get in the forward slash, we send a context, we get a context, and from that context, we respond with a text. Says hello Hono in this case, and we need to export the application. And that's it. That will be enough to make it work. And one of the cool things is Hono, as I said before, it have multiple runtimes. So we can use Cloudflare on top of it, and we'll just be using Wrangler to set up the development environment and to run it locally and then to deploy. For this series that we're going to be doing today, we want to do a little more. I don't want to say basic because I don't want to do all that way, but we will not deploy to Cloudflare yet until we set up some kind of security on the app. So it's something that I want to be clear here. We'll be running only locally and we'll be testing locally until probably next week we will talk about the security part and other elements, how to set it up and how to take care of that element. So this is a simple. So what I liked about Sono, if you go through the documentation, you can see the same app right here, how it works. It's a simple to create with Hono latest, and that will execute the installation. And some concepts that we need to have there is just understand the routers. So we have different type of routers that we can define it and how those will be working and through the app. And that's a simple way to execute it. It's work on top of web standards. We can have middleware. Middleware is pretty much something in the middle between the request and the response that will handle that and try to check something. And it's really, really cool. If you go to getting started, you will see that information here. You see with the Cloudflare workers how you need to set it up and how simple that is. It's pretty much the same across the board. One of the cool things about the API to understanding is that we have different methods. The application, when you initially say the new Hono, we have we can define a specific method, we can define all methods on specific ones. We can use a middleware that with the use a specific route, a base path. We have the not found on error, so we can change the default behavior on those, and those are really cool. And between other ones, person, it's actually really, really neat. For example, the not found by default give us text, and in the custom 404 message, we can change this to do something specific. Like for example, whenever there's an error, we can console it, save it somewhere else, and then return the actual error to the server. Um, and there's all the API that we can use through that. API here is regarding how to use the application and the actually framework itself. Routing, we have app dot the different verbs that we are already used to. We are able also to have a wildcard. So here is to get, post, put, and delete on the root, but also we can have a wildcard with a star. So that will cache everything that start with wild, whatever here, and then the word card. And we'll always get that. We can have like all the HTTP methods, so with the dot all instead of specific ones. We can have a custom one with on. It's actually pretty neat. We can work with parameters. So user forward slash column name. That means this could be anything. This will be cached as a parameter, and the name is the parameter is actually name. So it's something really cool that we can handle through. We can have multiple parameters like the ID here and common ID, and we can get those to the parameters too. We have regular expression, which is pretty neat about everything that you can do there. Between the context, this is the object that we'll get, and we can define, we can get the requests, we can get the statuses, we can get the headers. We set up the header for the response. We can read the body itself, well, or return the body. Actually, is all the context that it has, and the Hono request. We can get from the request the parameters, the queries. Whenever we send the query, the strings, or when send multiple with the same name, and we can get the request header. That's also important, request header for getting a specific one. Pretty cool. With exception preset. There's a couple of guides here that we can use too, and it's pretty neat. So I want to go through this process to create the application. So I'm already in my folder. Let's do npm create Hono latest. I already have installed it. If you don't have installed it, it will ask you that. So the applications I want to do a projects application. So I want to follow up my task and the project, so I can create projects, delete projects, update projects, do the full CRUD implementation. And those projects will have tasks, and those tasks can have different statuses. So I can have a to do, I will have some kind of in progress or complete, things like that. And the relationship will be that a project can have multiple tasks, but a task can have only one project per se. And that would be the main idea I want to follow here. So let's call this my projects recipe. And then choose which template I want to use. Let's just select Cloudflare workers because we want to execute that out there. And you want to install? Yes, install it using npm. Say yes. And let's wait for that. Everything is done. So if I go to my project recipe, I can open Visual Studio Code right here. It's taking longer. I don't know why. There you go. Let me change my profile. Cool. So the way it's set up, we create a project with a simple index TypeScript file. We will change this to JavaScript. We don't need to have TypeScript. But you will see that is pretty much that one. Have a little more lines because it did a jump line here. Pretty much saying import Hono, initialize the app. And then when you have a GET request in the forward slash, send the text hello Hono and export it. In order to see if it's actually working, we have the Wrangler file, and the Wrangler say that the names and everything, and it say that the source TypeScript file is the main one. That's what we need to understand here. We use Wrangler dev with the npm run dev, and Wrangler will create the development environment here. So this is a simple that I actually have it right here. Do npm run dev, and we'll open the app in 8787. If we open it, that will, and open in a new one. Let me see what it actually opened. Right here. Perfect. You can see that we just returning hello Hono. It's a simple text, doesn't have anything more. If I change this to hello there and save, we will see that reloading the local server, that my development server just gets reloaded. If I refresh my page, it will change from Hono to there. Right? Now we can change this to actually send JSON file. We can do something like this, and instead of a text, we need to send a JSON object. Let's save this, and if I send it again, now this is actually a JSON file, and I have this that allow me to see the preprint for the JSON itself, but you can see the point here. That means if we run our REST client, and I already have some there, but let me do a simple GET request to this one, this endpoint. It will give it my JSON response. We can see the header that the content type is application JSON, and we see the request being sent through that. It's pretty cool. If I send something that doesn't exist, you have the error handling. I have 404 and send me the text, and it says HTML because it's just text itself, but 404 not found. And that's it. Text plain and the content type itself. So we can see that with some lines, we can have API server that responds with a hello there object with a couple of lines. As simple as that. It's pretty neat. So we will working in those one and we'll be utilizing for our objectives. So the first thing that I want to do is stop the server because I want to change we're going to be jumping in TypeScript. So let's change this to JavaScript. You will see it looks pretty much the same. We will remove the tsconfig. We don't need that one. And our Wrangler, we change this one to be JavaScript file. And that's it. That's the only change that we're going to be doing for now. So we can do npm run dev and verify if everything is still working. We make request. Yeah, everything is still pretty much the same. So what I want to do here is I want to set up an element that we can have projects, we have tasks, and when we can create and do changes through those. So let me do simple endpoint. So if I want to do projects, and we need pretty much return a specific project, plural, it doesn't exist. So let me just do in memory. Let projects equal, let's do, this actually should be an array of objects. Let's do maybe a basic ID one, name, project number one. Let's do a description. And let's do something like, I don't know, could be in like first project on Hono API. And let's keep as it is. So if I save that and I send my object back whenever I do projects, I will see that in my projects endpoint. So I have this one called get all projects, array pointing to my projects endpoint. If I send that, from it didn't result to response. Ooh, I did something here probably. Hmm, interesting. Let me see what I did wrong. Projects, send out, oh, return. Of course, I need to return the C JSON. And you send it the object. I'm not saying what type of response need to be done. So I will see my JSON object for my project itself. If I do that and send this up, I will get my array. Cool. And I can now do, like example, something really quick. Let's do a post request. And for this, we'll get the payload, const payload will be my context body. And then we do .json. So we need to parse that information in. So we'll get the body from the object in the JSON. And then I will just send projects dot push, and I will set ID will be, let's do something here. Let next project ID equal to. So we can do next project ID. Let's do from that the rest of my payload. Payload will have name and description. And then after I do that, I will just send back. I will need to do my next project ID plus because for the next one need to increase it. And I will send this particular project per se. So let me send back my payload object. And I need to send back the ID that I created. So it will be next project ID -1 because I already increased it. And it's probably not the best approach, but just to get the hang of it. So if I do a post request to projects, I will read the body, I will push the body with a new ID to my project object, and I will return that particular project per se. So let's see if it actually works. And for that, I have this create project. And for this, I have in my body, and that will be later. Let's do new project with hello there. If I post this, let me save it. But if I post this, I will get my ID too. Cool. I didn't receive it the way that I needed. But well, if I go back to get all projects and I send that in, we just see that the second project there. So it looks like name is not where it's supposed to. Mm, let me see. I'm sending the payload. Oh, because I need to get the request body. I think that's the issue. I was I was changing the body of the object that will be responding, but I need to read the body of the request per se. Let's try this one more time. Get all projects will give me one. Yes. The server refreshes, so everything in memory just get redone. And if I create this, you got server error. What happened there? See, request body is not a function. Okay, probably I'm doing this wrong. And let's actually look here. So Hono request. Oh, we need to parse the body. It parse the body. That is, I did it wrong. Sorry for that, guys. Uh, let's go back here. So it's not actually body JSON. This is just parse the body. Let's save it. Restarter, perfect. It will get the projects. Just give me one. If I create a new one, it got created, but look like it didn't get created completely. He still gave me just that one. So it looks like this is not doing. Um, let's see. Okay, let's verify what I'm doing wrong here. The cool thing is we can do a simple console.log. Oh, I know what is happening. Parse the body takes time. So for the post, we need to do asynchronous. And we need to await. Because that's for the parsing element. Okay, let's try one more time. Getting one, the one that is always there. And if I do this one, oh, I didn't get it. Let me pause the video and find out what is my error is. Okay, I think I found my error. Look in the Hono request object, there is a JSON for my request, and this parses the request body type application JSON. And that was my issue. So I remember I had JSON there. So it was not that bad at the beginning, who I remember, but it should be like this. This means that this request, oops, here, it should be just JSON. I waited. That should be enough to get it. Should we have one? Cool. To create. Okay, you just create it. And if I get those, it should get two different projects. And now we have a simple API that is able to create new projects. And that was able to be done in less of 40 lines. You just get the projects and create new projects. and we're keeping those projects in memory. And we're sitting always with one project itself. And that should be enough to have a simple API there. Of course, this API is not robust. It doesn't have the best practice in place, but it does the job. I wanted to show that element per se. So let's now, in reality, do the real project the way it's supposed to be. And we'll be improve this information and we'll do separating different elements. Here what we did is we created a Hono app and we mounted everything through Hono. We start using routes and be mounting different things in different places. Before I continue, I will initialize my repository, add all the changes, initial API layout, let's call it. And let me publish this as a public repository. Cool. And if I open that, I can see here my project REST API and everything is here. Cool. So let's continue working with the app. So one of the first things that I want to do is I want to separate the layer of application. Actually, you know what? Let me install ESLint and pre-rare. So let's do, so we can have a couple of elements already help us through the app. So let's do install EList. It will be JavaScript. Find problems. It will be use modules. Yes. None of this framework. Use TypeScript. No. It will run in Node. Oops. I need to cancel this because this should actually be say Node, no browser. So let me cancel this and execute this one again. So I want to link JavaScript, syntax and problems, modules, none of the framework. It doesn't use this one. I need to change this. So I need to put spacebar to remove browse and add Node. I like the, it will be that one. We install them. Yes, install them using npm. That should be it for npm itself. And let's now install Preader here. Let's do get starter. Let's look for Preader. Let's look through here. Here, perfect. We need to link config Preader. Cool. To install this, I just need to install this. And we'll add to the extents in the ESLint file. And we put that pretty much at the end. We need to import it if we're using the ESLint config JavaScript. So yeah. So let's do this one. Let's paste it here. Cool. Let's go back here in the ESLint. We need to import our configuration. And then we need to add it to the at the end of the export per se. So send this one over here. And then we just need to send this one over here. Save it. Okay. It's working there. We need to install Preader too. I think we didn't install that one. Install this one, save as development environment, dependency, sorry. Let's do here, cool. And I think the only thing that we need to add here will be we need to add our let's add the pre-tier RC file. Cool. And for that one, I just have a couple of quick single quotes and semis to false. I think that should be it. And that will allow me to now, if I save this, the semicolon should disappear and this should be single quotes. Let's see. There you go. That's what I did it. Cool. I think that should be enough for now. So after have that, let's just add it, use clean and pretty. Cool. So now I have more my styling in this particular element. So the first thing that I need to be doing or changing, I think, will be export the data per se of the element. Now, what I'm doing here for pushing directly and send that object directly, like, is not the best way to do it because I'm sending the live connection from my database, and this is my database for the moment. So maybe cloning that up will be the best. So if somebody requested this object being clear to be used somewhere else, and we're thinking just about best practices here. So what I want to do is I will delete this. I will delete this, and actually will delete this. I think I even want to delete this because I don't want to send anything. I don't need to send anything there. So I just have a really empty app for now. So the only thing that I want to use on my app, it will be as it is. Like I don't have routes yet. I would work on those later. So let me get back here and my source, I will create a new file. That file will be my data and I create a store JavaScript. Think this as my database per se. In my database, I will have a couple of things here. So I'm creating an object called seated at that this will be initiated whenever I run the server the first time. Why? Because I'm having seed data or initialized data that always have two different projects for now. And I want to use the created and updated at this particular time. That's what I'm saying. That's it. Nothing else. This is a best practice. Whenever you create an object, you have the created at, and whenever that object gets changes, you just update the updated at, and you will keep in those records. So I will use it, and it will be the object structure for my projects per se. I have portfolio website, for example, and design system workshop. I just having those there. I will have my next project ID. It will be 3 because I have 1 and 2. The first thing that I need to do, because I was mentioned before, I want to clone the object. So we'll have a helper function that whenever I send an object, I will return with a clone of that object without changing the original one. That will, how can I say this? It will free up the original object and somebody else can make requests or be pushing things and without the object being locked because this guy, somebody's been actually using directly. So that's what I'm doing here. Just a simple function that will help me to clone that. So after I have that clone, I need to create a couple of functions that we use. So I have a function to list my projects that pretty much go to my projects and return a mapping of the clone. That's it. Like clone everything and send that back. I will have a function to get a project by ID. This is what it does. And if I'm going too fast, probably you can pause to see it, or you will get access to the source code too. So we're sending an ID, and here is a simple to find an item with item ID equal ID to provide that project, and that project that exists, we clone it. If not, we return null. Simple as that. Now the create function with something like this. We have a timestamp. That timestamp will require to have a new date, and let's actually have that after the clone. Then you return the current date at the moment that it's been executed. Different than this one, this is being provided at the moment is the application runs the first time, and this will be running the current time every time this function is called. As simple as that. So I created a timestamp, and then I created my project object that will have my ID with the next project ID, my name with the input name. We can send in the payload through here, and I trim it. So I just being careful to remove extra trailing spaces. If you have a description, I send that. If not, it will be empty string. That means my key of description will always exist, but it could be empty without being null. So we're keeping consistency. And then we send the created and updated to timestamp. We push the project ID to +1. We push the new project to my projects, and then we clone the current one. That means we don't have the direct reference. We just have the clone working. And that will be just my created person. Now, to update, this is a tricky one. I will explain what this actually does. Like, okay, that looks complicated, maybe, but it will make a lot of sense if we see line by line. So in order to update a project, we need to find where that project is located inside the array, because we're using arrays. In order to verify the array, we need to find the index. That's what I'm doing here. If the index doesn't exist, this one returns -1. It didn't find that index with this criteria. We just return null, like update project cannot be done. As simple as that. But if it exists, that means we can proceed. And the first thing that we need to do, current project will be my project with that index. I create some project updated that will every value from current, and then I override name only if name exists, and override description only if description exists. And then I put the updated at there. The created at is stay the same because I'm not messing that up. That's the only thing that I'm doing here. And then I send that project updated to the location where it was before, and then I just return the clone because I will not send the direct object, just return a copy of that particular object per se. Last one, and I will keep this out for now. The lead project is pretty much very similar. Here I'm doing something tricky to verify. So I verify my star size, and then I filter out that one, and I change my project with the filter out. And if the length the same as the star size, that means didn't delete anything. I return false, but if it deleted something, I just return true. And that's it. So I have my main database a little more robust about how the project is going to be created, updated, deleted, or read it, multiple or one. So now I can just do this and clean it up and add it projects store. Cool. So now let's have an endpoint that will be using that. And for that, I would like to have a route. So let me do a new file. It will be inside my routes folder. And let's call this projects. That will be routes project pretty much. And for this, the first thing that we need to be doing, we need to be importing Hono. We will create a new application called projects. There will be a Hono app. And then we'll mount this to the main application. And we need to import from our data store. So from our import something from our data store. And what we need to do here? Well, we can do something like this. And let's import these projects. So here we're start thinking a little smart. What we could have it. We have our data in a separate file, and we port in the list project function, and we just list it, and we return that object %. As simple as that. And this should be working the way that we need it in order to see it all everything that we need. But this application is not being um, used by anybody. Like every application from it to be exported, because the one that we have in here is the main app %. So we need to mount it. So in order to mount it, I could use something like this. I like it. So I will create another one called API. That will be also a new Hono app. And then my application, I will say use. That means it will be actually not use, it's route. I will route everything that goes to API to my API application. So I can mount different mini application on top of the other one. And that's what I'm doing here. And before actually mounting that, I can just mount in my API route everything that goes to projects. Remember, plural and nouns. I will get my projects import that will came from my routes projects %. Here, what we're saying is saying that application will use API and will send everything to API. And then API will use projects and will be everything from projects. So here we have listed the root, but we are not actually calling root. We are calling projects because when it is being mounted. But all this is being mounted in API. That means that the full route to get this get request, that is this one over here, will be base URL /API /projects. And now we can see that in action. If we go here, if we see the root, nothing will came. Like, oh, I think it's not running. Yeah, it's not running. npm run dev. Cool. We have the 404 because that no exists. API doesn't exist either, even that is mounted, but it's not mounted the root one. It just mounted API projects. And now we're able to see the two different projects that we have in our baseline. So here we're starting working smarter. doing separation of concerns. I'm listing those through our projects per se, right? But I found something that I didn't like. If I get this, yeah, it's giving me a 404, but it's not giving me a real object that we need to provide the way that it's supposed to be. And at the same time, our projects per se, it's giving the information, but it's not giving me, it's not in a data object, and it's not giving the meta information either. So I would like to fix that. I will now that I know that I'm able to see this information, I want to work a little bit in the backend and how to set up the correct environment. So let's just add a API and projects routes. So let's work on those. So the first thing is I need to make my application a little bit better. And one of the things that I want to do here is I need to react whenever my application is not found. I need to do something, and I need to do something with on error. Because when there is an error, it's not doing something that it's supposed to be either. It's sending me text once. So I want to create an error object that will allow my application to respond in JSON. And then in the future, we can react through those the way they're supposed to be. And for that, I need to extend my traditional error in order to make it work the way it's supposed to. For that, I will save this at the moment. We'll get back to those. And I will create in my source directory, I will use utils or helpers, and let's call errors.javascript. And for this, I will just create a class. And I hope that you remember your object-oriented object-oriented programming. And I just want to extend my base error, and I will create something called API error object that will supersede my message. But I added another parameters for the constructor for the name, status, code, and details, where details by default is an empty array. What does it mean? When I have an error, I will want to send the status for 404, 500, 429, whatever we needed. We send that in the code. We will respond to those. We have a code, and we have details. Whenever we need to provide more information, those will be in an object inside the details, and that will be multiple objects. It could be because there's an array. And then we just create a simple export function that verifies if the error that we're sending is an API error with the instance of. It's as simple as that. So that will allow us to go to our index and import that here. And I can send now, and I can work through that. So an error, like the not found, we know that is not an API error, but if an error is an API error, we will provide do something about it. But what we need to be doing, well, I think we need to work with my routes. So in the utils, I will create a new file called response. And this file, what I'm thinking here, I will be creating response objects the way that those responses need to be. So one of the things that I'm thinking here by default is I need to build a error payload. So in order to create the payload for the error, I need to send my context, my code, my message, and my details. And I build that object inside an error wrapper. And I will create a trace ID and provide that particular trace ID. that trace ID, when you save this in the future in your logs, when the different systems that read the information, you will be able to select or filter out for trace ID, and you say okay, and you will able to troubleshoot what happened or something got wrong in that particular. So we're creating a best practices here. We're not going to be using trace ID in this course, but I want to show you how to do that. So I make a function that is not there yet, and let me show you that. Hono has a key value store that's pretty neat, and we can do with get and set. So whenever we start a request, we can set a value, and that value will travel with the request in all the middlewares and all the elements, and will always be there. And it's pretty neat. So we're just telling it, you know what? For my context, we are sending the content here, we're sending the context here, we're sending the context here, we're saying, well, get that trace ID. And for any reason that trace ID doesn't exist, create a new one with a random UID element from crypto. This is basic from Node.js. So that's what we're saying here. Like if that doesn't exist, create a one random one. So well, that means that if we're trying to get it, we need to set it somewhere. If we will go back to the index, we can use a wildcard as a middleware. So right here, before everything, I will say my application use for every route. It doesn't matter which one is, it doesn't matter what type, anything. I will set the trace ID to the random ID, and then I will go to the next route. So this is just a middleware saying that, hey, whenever you have a request, it doesn't matter the type, create a value trace ID. It's not being sent in a header or something like that. It just save it inside my application, and I'm setting that in. And whenever I need to get back, I just wait. Next is send it to the next element. Simple as that. So that will allow me to have my ID. And with this, we were able to build our payload. But now I can create now a send error object. And this is the one that we'll be using mostly. I think I don't need to export the build error payload, but let's keep as it is. So my send error will take the same context, status, code, message, and details. And we use this object, this function, to build it, and we'll set the status to status. And we'll respond as a JSON, always. That's what I'm saying, like send an error. So now that I have a send an error, I can import those in my main file. And I said, you know what? If something happened for the not found, I just want to return. Oops. I need to send my context and I need to respond with this. So we'll create send an error, send my object, my status 404 with not found, and send in the not found element. And the cool one about my own error is that I can verify it's an API error. I can set my error details and create a send error object. If not, that means that I have an unhandled error, and I will return that with a 500 internal server error. So if my API have an issue, I will see that on error this happened. This will catch this one, and I will send it the way it's supposed to. If not, it will send this other object. And this what it does. It's something as simple as going back here. We've got projects. Let's actually go to project doesn't exist anymore. So we get the 404, but instead of having the text here, now we have a JSON file. that give us a little more details what happened there. So we are following best practices now because we know that our projects now live in API projects. But this response object is not wrapped the way that it's supposed to be either. So let's just comment this out. Build the error responses, and inside the responses, I want to get a couple of different responses too. And that will be send resource or send collection. When I send one resource, sorry, I want to return it always as a JSON inside my data element. And I specify the status here. By default is 200. When I send a collection, I want to send my data. I want to send my meta with the count and set the response as a status. This will allow me to do a couple of things. I can, in my projects route, I can actually get those here, and instead of returning my JSON data, I can return my send collection. If I do my send collection, this should be allow me, and well, I'm not using send resource yet. Let's remove it for now. This should be allow me, instead of having my project directly as it is, send those through data because we are building through that, and we have the meta with count 2. How cool is this? We have now a proper real world reusable function that grabs or responds the way it's supposed to be. And whenever we send to a specific one or whenever we send a one. So if I do get projects one, right now it's lost and found. Let's actually work with that API point. So this will be really, really simple. And well, let me do this here. I will get this in a minute. Let's import our API errors. Let's put that way for my response. For list projects, let's import get project by ID. And this ID will be pretty much this one over here. Cool. And then here we need to import my send resource. Oops. Send resource. There you go. Let me remove this to remove any confusion. So if I do as for get me from ID, I will get the ID and get my project by that ID specifically. And if there is no project, I will send an IP error of 404. But if it exists, I will send the resource. So that means if I send this, it should work now. Providing, well, it didn't work. Oh, I think because by default every parameter that I'm sending is a text, and we're having the ID as number. So we need to build those. So let me as simple as put a plus here at the beginning. They should make it work. It will fail for other elements, but for now it will work. And let's try it. Let's remove this here. Let me get project one. And inside my data, only one object is just being set. If I do project two, my project 2 is being sent. If I do project 3, a 404 is being sent. Of course, this failed when I do something like get project X. They always gave me like 404. And instead of giving a bad request or something like that. And we will handle that in a minute. So that's the way that we can actually get the parameter for ID and specify that. Let me save this and let's do as simple as what I can do here. What a change in responses. Oh, added, send source and send collection responses. Cool. So something that I want to do now, before we continue moving forward, we're seeing that now we need to start working with validation. And that validation need to verify that this ID is actually what I actually need to be done. If it is, I need to work on it in a way that will show me and parse it correctly or give me an error if that doesn't exist. So for that, we need some validation. And for validation, I'm planning to use SOT. Not general SOT, actually. SOT, so TypeScript first, well, without using TypeScript in this schema validation. And we can use probably traditional JavaScript where a project is small, but I want to show you how this actually works, and it's pretty neat. So you create an object, you specify the keys, and you define, well, this should be a string, this should be a number, and then you should be able to use those the way that you need it. And it's pretty neat. And there's a lot of ways to customize, to verify, and you will see when there's an error, instead of SOT error, we have an array with issues when we are not sending the correct information. And this is exactly what I need to show you here. Because this issue will be parsed later and we'll send it to the details for the error send error objects. And that's what we're going to be doing right now. So to install SOT, we just need to introduction, installation. We just need to install it as simple as this. Let's close this. Let's install it. Let's run it one more time. Let's just install it. SOT. I like to click and change once in a while. And now I can create a validation utility. And for this one, I need to import SOT and I will need to import my API error. So for here, I need to do, let me check. Let's create a parameters schema. And this will be for the ID parameters. And now you will see what I'm saying about those particular validations. So here we're saying like, for example, my parameter schema, it should be a string. Regex is just to verify that it's a digit. It could be a multiple. This means it could be a multiple number, so a digit with X amount of digits. And then we transform that to a number. This is pretty much the same what we did with the plus, but number is a little more correct. And we refine the value to verify if that number is inside my parameter of safe integer. That means it's not too big. And the value should be positive. If not, we make an error. So here we just having a validation that my schema for parameter, that's what it should be. With that, I can now create a simple, let me check, function that will define if my parse ID parameter was. So parse ID parameters will do a route value, and we define the field name by default is actually ID. And we'll get that route value and we'll verify if it passed with my schema that we didn't set, and we'll check it should be a string, should be this type of string. Let me transform it to a number, and let me refine that number is inside where it's supposed to be. That's what it's saying. If not, if success doesn't exist, you say, you know what? Let's create a new API error with a bad request, malformer request. And we send the details. We just send one detail here. We say the field have an issue, and the issue is my message for my issue 0. If for any chance that message doesn't exist, and then ID must be a positive integer, just being safe here. That's it. But doing that, I should be able to go back to my projects, and my project, I should be able to get from my validation, import from validation. I should be able to import my parse ID parameter. And with my parsed ID parameter, instead of sending my request parameter and parse it here, like this is not, I have a function that does that for me. And then I get that particular ID for my project ID. Oops. And that's it. Now, if my ID is not valid, that's okay. I will never be here. Because if my ID is not valid, my parse, we actually throw the error. That means that this line is not going to be executed anymore. Let's see that in action. So let's go back. If we do 2, that one exists. If we did 3, that one should be an error and not found. But if I do an X, that should be an error, a bad request. And we're saying that field ID should be a positive integer. And we trace it back with a specific ID. And we have a bad request error here. So now we say like, we're just telling and having to think about the different responses and how those responses should be working across the board. So let's post that at added ID param validation. And let's start adding the rest of the validations. So now I can get back to my validation, and I can think on, I need to have a create project. I need to have a patch project. I need to have, and I think those are the two that I need to have. So something that SOT has that I like also, we have the strict function. Where is it? No, it's not that one. These methods are generally no longer necessary. Oh, I was using a strict before. And pass through, we don't need to have those anymore. We can keep it as it is. So cool. That means that I can do something like this. I wanted to talk about what the string does, but look like in this new version is actually not needed. So if I go back to my validation, I could have another type of validation here. I will have my project create schema, and let me put that one actually before my parameter schema, after my parameter, before my function. This is just to tell my application that I need to set a name and an optional description. My name is required, it should be a string, and these are the message for the errors, and it should be at least one character. And then my description is optional, and this is my error for invalid type. That's it. Now we should be able to validate that through that. Now, this is whenever we create a project. If we need to update or patch a project, it's something similar with the difference that we are not having the name as optional too. So we need to create another schema that will validate my object whenever this object has uh, a patching element. So let's do this one and remove my here. Cool. So whenever I patch, I need to have my name and my description. Both are optional. And that's it. And then we say super refined is just an extra validation. It's saying that something because both are optional, that means I could not send anything. So this I will say if I don't have any keys, you know what? I just need to have those. They were supposed to be. Ooh. Look like my issue code is deprecated too. I have old code here. So what we're telling it is that yes, both are optional, but if nothing was provided, um, if nothing was provided, that means we need to be. You still need to have at least one, and that's it. Let me just verify my thought issue, and let me correct that one. Here, give me a second. Okay, so I was reading this migration guide, and I will do some validation or changes on my source code. It's minor, it's not that big of a deal, but just reading this, I was used to SOT 3 and SOT 4 came not far along. So I was not used about those so much changes that already came. So let's start working on those. So the first thing is that the way that we send the error, we usually need to send that in a better way. So let me have my param search will be a little smaller. We need to send, we'll pretty much do the same. Verify the string, regex is the same, but then we just send the error. If there's an error, this happened. The transform happened, and we just refine the value. If we save integer, a value, if not, we just send the error, and that's it. My project create schema, it gets a little simpler. It will be a strict object, so it need to be this particular thing, and we're saying that we have a name and a description. Name should be a string, minimum one, and the string the same. It's an optional. My project patch will be a strict object too. And what they changed here is that the way that we send the errors per se. The same, both are optional, but because both are optional, we need to verify that at least one of them is actually there. Oh, I didn't change my refine. That one should be something like this. It will just need to be pretty much code custom. Cross the board. There you go. So we remove that error. And we think that my body should have at least one of the length, the keys. If the keys is 0, that means it doesn't work. So that's pretty much what I'm saying. Both are optional, but at least one should appear. It's just a hack, let's say like that, to work it. But now that we have those, we should be able um, to to validate those with a schema. And I will get those through two different functions. We will call this from our API, validate project create and validate project patch, and we'll export the validate with schema. The validate with schema will pretty much be running every time that we do some kind of validation. So validate with schema, what it does is just do a safe parse of the schema that we send. If there's a result success, my details are empty. And I will map those detailed sub issues to my errors issues if those actually exist. So if this success, I send an empty, that means everything went good. But if not, I will just map those up in particular issues. And those issues, don't look up too much to this particular function. You can read more details and we can have a meeting through those. The only thing that I'm doing is my details 0, and we'll build my details for every sort error that we have. As simple as that. So we have those at least the way they're supposed to be. And this will pretty much validate with schema and will parse it and will tell me there's an issue or not. And when we build the endpoint for the call, we know that our issues is going to be there, parsed in the details part, and those details are the one that we're sending for the send error object. It doesn't make too much sense, but let's actually see those in hand. So let's go back to projects. For my projects here, let's work in the post request. I like to work the routes in order. So because this using this one, I will push that down a little bit. So let's do my post. I will parse my JSON body and I validate my project create. Now validate project create, that will mean we need to import those from validation and parse my JSON body. We actually not been talking about that yet. So we will send something here. So for validate my project create, we read the JSON body and we parse those through JSON. That's what we're doing here. And then we're sending that to validate to my details. And detail is a field, an issue. That's what we're sending. And if details is bigger than 0, the length, we have an API error. We have an issue. If not, we just create a project. To create a project, we need to send that through the data store. That should be here, create project. That's it. Then we do something really cool in the creation. We create a new header. We saw this in whenever we do a 201, a creation in the post. It's a good practice to have a location and we send the project ID with the resource where it's located. And then we'll send a specific resource, but instead of sending us 200, we send the 201. Because remember, 201 means object created. So if all this works, that's pretty much what we're doing. In order to have this handling, we need to import that from our body object that we don't have yet, but we will. Let me just import through here right away after my store. I have my utils together. And here I will create a new file called body.javascript. And this body JavaScript will be really simple. I will get my API error and I will try to get my request JSON. If my request JSON fails, there's an API error because my request is malformed. Really similar to what we do with the parameter. When we define that the parameter should be a number, here we're defining that my body should be a JSON object. If it's not a JSON object, we know that by default, before even seeing it, we have our request and we stop everything. That's it. So this should allow us to go with the create project in the API project endpoint. My body, I should send the name and my description. And if I send those, I will get my data. And if I go to my headers, you can see my ID is number 3. In my headers, I can see the location, API project tree. So here we actually have something really cool. What happens if I just send the name, project 2? It works because the description is, how can I say, description is optional. It's doing, and my location actually working too. If we do a new project tree, actually let's do description without actually sending the name, we have a validation error because name is required. If we send name and we send other, whatever, they will fail because field is not allowed. So we stopping to be injected data that we should not have on the server too. So that's part of the cool thing about the validation, that we're just defining exactly the objects that we need to be sending. Now, if this is a malformed JSON, and I'm sending text instead of actually JSON, that will allow me to have a batch request because my JSON is not the way it's supposed to be. So this is how this is actually working. Let me just do some changes here and have this description. Cool. If I do get all, well, let me just send this one. It's been created with ID 5 at L. Oh, I need to send it without the number 1. Ooh. API project route not found. Get. Interesting. API projects. Oh, there you go. My API projects exist. Send my data. I have my 5 different projects there and my meta counting the way it's supposed to be. Pretty cool, right? We are having a robust API with best practices working across the board. I think the only things that we need to handle now will be our projects delete, and will also be our projects patch. So let's go back. Let's actually go back here and save those. Let me add those and add other validation for projects. And on the endpoint, we have the get by ID, and the post. Let's actually do the patch by ID. And the patch by ID is to update one particular one. And we need to import validate patch. And we need to import update project. from the store. Cool. So the patch, the way that it works is this. We need to patch a specific ID inside my resort projects. And the first thing that we need to do, we need to parse the ID to see it's a valid one. After that, I need to verify my payload if it's actually a JSON file. And after I see that, I can see my details to parse in my project patch, different than the create one. And this will verify that each one of the two should appear there. If details have content, I send API error 422 validation error. And I send actually the details there. But is this actually zero? I proceed. We update the project with the update project function that we already have. This should return true or false, remember? True when the project is valid and it's updated, false when it's not. So when saying that this actually didn't update it, it didn't found it. So now I'm saying, you know what? That was a 404. That project doesn't exist. But if it does exist, I send the resource and we know that it's pretty much clone my updated project. Something very similar for my deletion. Let me just import deletion. And I will say, whenever a project is deleted, I need to parse the ID. I need to delete the project. If deletion was false, that means it didn't exist. If not, I will say with a 204, that is pretty much the status that we need to send whenever we delete something. And we don't send anything like the object should be null, but we just send the status %. That means the deletion was successful. So I already saved those. Let's actually test those. So I have already here my get project saved. And I have my post for creation. Let me duplicate this to do a patch. Save it. And let's change the name to patch project, or let's do update project. Let me I did the change in the wrong one, but that's okay. Okay, and then my patch, I can duplicate that one. Selected, I can do a delete, and I can change the name to delete project, right? This should be a delete, and let me save it. There you go. So now I have all those here. I will delete my random anime. I don't need it anymore. I just have the one that I actually need for my projects. Great. So if I update this, I will actually get all my projects first. And I get into, if I update project number 2, and let's change the name to new project name. If I send that, my new project is now called new project name. If I change the name one more time, I can see that the name has been changed the way it's supposed to. Pretty cool. What about my description? New project description is working. And that one is actually working too. Cool. If I do name, it doesn't matter the order. Let's do sys, and let's change description to sys too. I'm gonna send those. Yeah, it do the change. If I send other, this should fail. Other is not valid. And if I don't send anything, this should fail. At least one field to update. Cool. So it's doing what it's supposed to. Nice. Let's just remove those and I will save it as it is for now. Now for my deletion, if I get all the projects, I have project one and project two. I said now I messed it up with my project two. I don't remember what it was. Let me actually delete it. So I should be able to just delete my project two. And we get the content is a delete request with a null response. If I get my all projects, the two should not appear anymore because it got deleted. And my counting is actually one. Pretty cool. If I send the deletion again, this should fail because 2 doesn't exist. Even now, 404. Even that deleted before, when after it got deleted, I just get a 404 error. And this is the way that we're able to handle this particular app in order to create, read, create, update, and delete this full CRUD application for projects. I will stop the video now. For this week, I will ask to provide me just the GitHub URL or your project. I will test it out to it's actually working. Oops. Let me add it here. Add it and patch and delete projects. And in order to make different, because always need to deliver something different that we just saw here, the projects folder and the project store, the one that is being seeded by default, just change it to something else, like the name and the description. That's it for both of them. Or add more if you want to add more. I'm okay with that part. But at least it should not be portfolio website. It should not be design system workshop. Make those changes, provide the information. And the next week, we'll start talking about the task endpoint. We'll be adding those tasks. We'll be talking about nested endpoints. That will be really cool. And it should help us to understand what we have been doing in a better way. So that simple app that we did in less than 40 lines, it got a more robust, bulletproof, not completely, but a more senior level application where we need to start thinking about the different elements, the error, the consistencies of the responses, and the way that we should be providing the information to our clients that will be, in this case, the front-end app that we'll do in a couple of weeks. So far, I hope that you like it. Any question, any doubt, don't hesitate to reach me. Happy coding, everybody.